What's up, guys, and welcome back to the Biology and Health Bloom Institute summer course. Thank you so much for attending, and you'll learn a lot in today's session. So let's get started. So you guys are going to be doing a Blookit, which is an activity or game, and it covers the things that we learned in our last two classes. They are really helpful because they can be used solo for students in asynchronous classes like us without a teacher having to be there inside the game, like playing live. So you need to create a login. So I would sign in with Google. That's really fast. And you guys can just copy paste this link into your browser and play the game. And there's a lot of different themes of the game, such as Bitcoin hacking, etc., to make the game really fun. And also it covers only things that we learned in our last two classes, and we made it ourselves. So if you have any doubts or got anything incorrect, all of the material on this Blookit is reviewed on the previous two slideshows and videos. So you can just go and check your doubts from the previous material that we have. So just paste or type this link into your browser and play the game. So I'll give you like 20 or 30 minutes to do this, as well as check your incorrect questions and see the correct answers. You can pause the video, play this, come back, and let's get started with the lesson. Okay, so welcome to class 3, which is ATP. ATP is one of the most important biological molecules in our human body. It's really important for the function of ourselves as well. So what is it? It's a very special molecule, and it's a rechargeable battery for cells. It's a molecule which powers cells and allows them to divide, reproduce, and power our human body. When a cell needs energy, it uses ATP to get energy stored in its chemical bonds. So ATP is one of the most important concepts you'll learn about in biology. It is the molecule that powers life energy. So please pay attention in today's class. So here is the chemical bond of ATP. I know it looks kind of confusing, but trust me, it's not. So ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. So adenosine is nothing but a sugar molecule plus a nitrogen containing molecule. So this is the sugar molecule over here, and this is the nitrogenous base. And triphosphate means tri as in 3 and phosphates. So these are 3 phosphate molecules over here, and there are 3 of them, right? The 3 yellow circles. So that's just triphosphate. Just like in triangle, it's a 3-angled polygon. Here's a triphosphate with 3 phosphate molecules. Yeah. So let's get started with the rest of the lesson. And I would also like you guys, please jot this down on your paper, especially the structure of this molecule, because it's really important, and especially the phosphate. Please note that there are 3 phosphate molecules, and yeah. So let's get started. You do not need to learn the functions of the sugar molecule or the nitrogen containing base in this class, which are essential for ATP, but you will need to know what ATP does and what's the function of phosphate as a resource. Let's get started. So phosphate groups are like electricity, and ATP is like a rechargeable battery. Phosphate contains energy to detach and power our body. So as we eat, exercise, and do physical activities, phosphate detaches down from ATP one by one. So this is why there are 3 phosphate molecules, because it goes away to power other molecules in the body and release energy elsewhere in the body. So this yellow part is the phosphate group, right? And one phosphate will detach one by one, and as they detach, they release a lot of energy and to be used for the rest of the body. So please write this down, that phosphate detaches and releases energy for the rest of the body. So here you can see that phosphate can detach to release energy. So first we start off with 3 phosphate molecules, then we have 2, then we have 1, and then we have none, right? So normally in humans, it's mostly 3 or 2 phosphate molecules that remain. And if you get to the stages of 1 or 0, that's probably like a bad sign of health, and it rarely happens. But yeah, as you can see, it's a phase or a process, and phosphate keeps detaching from the ATP to power the body and give energy. So here's ATP versus ADP. So these 2 molecules may sound similar, but they aren't. So ATP has 3 phosphate groups, like all 3 of these phosphates attached to it, right? and ADP has only 2, right? The second one in this diagram is ADP that has only 2 phosphate groups attached to it. So ADP is adenosine diphosphate, prefix di meaning 2, and ATP becomes ADP after ATP releases 1 phosphate group in a burst of energy and only 2 phosphate groups remain attached. The diagram to the left shows how this works. So I'd like you guys to copy down this diagram, and if you haven't already, please copy down this diagram to show how phosphate can detach to release energy. It's really important. Okay, let's move on. So AMP is adenosine monophosphate. So AMP is the most needy and discharged form of ATP. Normally only 1 phosphate group will be lost, but in extreme conditions there will be only 1 phosphate group left. This rarely happens. Even rarer is that the final phosphate group will be lost and ATP turns to just AT. And this does not typically happen in normal circumstances, but it may happen in people undergoing extreme conditions such as hypoxia, which is oxygen deprivation, and other extreme situations that can lead to extreme super fast ATP consumption. So adenosine monophosphate is the third one in this diagram with only 1 phosphate left. Mono means 1, right? Like monocolor means 1 color. So that's the last phosphate is left, and that's really low energy. It's like a battery and the battery is on 1%. That's how it works, right? So here's a diagram of AMP. So this diagram shows the difference between ATP, ADP, and AMP. Like mentioned before, ATP has 3 phosphate groups, ADP with 2, and AMP with 1 phosphate group. So you can see this, right? And there's a difference in the amount of phosphate groups they have, and when phosphate groups release or detach, they release a lot of energy, right? So the only reason why phosphate groups get detached is to give the body energy and power the rest of our cells. So if you've lost a lot of phosphate groups, that means that means your body has used a lot of energy, and we'll learn about how this works later. So we can take a break and stretch for 5 minutes. Pause the video. So here are some relations to health and biology for this ATP. So if we get less sleep, ATP might be produced less. And the reason for sugar cravings may be because ATP synthesization has not occurred properly in our bodies, and we seek sugar to power ATP molecules, which we will learn about later. And exercise, this is the most important one, exercise drains out phosphate from ATP. This is why we feel hungry after exercising, because food powers ATP, or food is the thing that is eventually broken down into giving us ATP for our body. So this is why we feel hungry after exercising, and phosphate will be released and detached to give energy to the rest of our body after we exercise. So while we're exercising, we lose that phosphate, and after the exercise, we'll probably be left with like 2 phosphate groups. And if you did a really intense one, maybe even 1 phosphate group, right? And here are effects of ATP on the human body. So it provides energy for muscles in the body to move. It can send hunger alerts to the body in order for telling the body to eat more and take in energy to produce more ATP. Influences pain perception, regulates the blood flow and other health components and immune responses. For these reasons, always remember to eat on time and don't ignore the signals that your body tells you. Otherwise, ATP won't be able to be used to its full potential, and you'll probably always be on like 1 phosphate group, which is a really bad sign of health, right? So what powers ATP? ATP production is powered by cellular respiration, which we will learn in the next class. So here is a review question. What gets detached from ATP and why is it released? The answer was phosphate, and the phosphate groups detach from ATP because they need to release energy to power the rest of the body, and this is the only reason why phosphate detaches from ATP. So you have learned a lot today, so thank you and see you in class 4.